All right, it's been a while since I've posted anything or published anything, and there's been a lot going on. I just haven't had time to do this, and been occupied with a lot of things that have to be done in life. That said, what's going on? Right, we wanna look into this. So, what am I going to do in this video? We're going to first take a quick look at where we're at. I'm not going to get into all the details yet, but I'm going to show you where I think we're at roughly from predictive programming like IPETGOATI, and then from there we'll look at sort of how these current events fit into this, including Venezuela, the unrest in the U.S., and even the threat of extreme civil unrest or even civil war, which has been coming up in various places that usually don't even talk about it. So that's interesting. And in relation to possibly, wars elsewhere and so on, where I think we're at. And then we're going to look at, in order to help us understand where we're at better, predictive programming in a film that we haven't considered yet, which is a bit surprising that you find it in here, but I'm going to explain why it's not that surprising. That's in the movie Barbie. People probably don't think of Barbie as a movie they even want to get through from start to finish. But it's actually a very interesting film to analyze and to understand the creator's intention and also the predictive programming I think that's in there. Now, before we get into that, the review of IPETGOATI and where we're at, just to show you that this isn't insane. The film itself was written by Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, husband and wife, and they actually were involved in the creation of another film that's very important for predictive programming, White Noise. Okay, that's written and directed by Baumbach and starred Greta Gerwig as Babette. Okay, and White Noise was released less than 1 year before Barbie, and they're on very similar themes, and they have very similar predictive programming, believe it or not. And we actually gain more information that is not made explicit necessarily in White Noise in Barbie. Okay, so this isn't a stretch, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Where are we at? Okay, so you remember from IPETGOATI that at the end of the film, Rahor Kuit comes out of the church, and finally the passion of Rahor Kuit, that's this character who looks like Jesus to people, but he's not representing Jesus in this at all. We have the Eye of Horus here. His passion, he just opened his eyes and he was suffering his passion. The cross is about to disappear, was suffering caused by the existence of the church. And he has his back to the church as it crumbles here. And we're going to see that. See, the crown of thorns disappears as the church crumbles. Now, this character, for various reasons, we know to be Rahor Kuit, which is in Thelema, Aleister Crowley's occultic religion, basically a god of vengeance who brings in the Aeon of Horus, the sort of wrathful, vengeful Horus. And because in Thelema they have the Aeon of Isis, then that's followed by the Aeon of Osiris, which maps onto what you'd call the Christian era in their thinking. And then after the Aeon of Osiris, you go into the Aeon of Horus, and it's not a peaceful transition from one Aeon to another. It's a complete change from institutions that are effectively involved, from the Christian era. So the church, institutions that manifest or have that character of self-sacrifice, humility, things like this. They're rejected by Horus. And the Thelemites going into the Aeon of Horus, and their motto is, that you do what you will, do what you want, this sort of thing. And that's the entering into the post-Christian world. And so the film, IPETGOATI, is about this transition, including the destruction of the church, and behind it, the destruction of the USA, this city that is being overtaken by a gigantic wave and also a digital wave looking like Wi-Fi there, the Wi-Fi symbol. Now, as he turns away from, with these two sides of what's represented in the film, the short as the Whore of Babylon, these two sides of the Whore of Babylon are being destroyed, he's going to look forward, and we're going to see the rings. We have the 5 eclipses, starting with the 2017 Great American Eclipse, and going to go to the April 8th, 2024 Great American Eclipse. And we have 1, 2, 3, and now here comes the 4th eclipse, and we get these shots coming out. This is destroying these pyramids, which are burial grounds. We're dealing with the realm of Osiris, who's the deity over the dead, and that's why they put Christianity in there under the realm of Osiris in their minds, because Osiris is the governs the realm of the dead, and Christianity is a religion that values self-sacrifice, self-denial, even dying for others, and Christ is God who died and rose again for our salvation, this death and resurrection motif, which they completely reject in the Aeon of Horus. And we're seeing the destruction of what remains of the Aeon of Osiris at the end here. After that 4th eclipse, then we're going to go into the 5th eclipse. That's April. It's going to show up right here. And then after that, it goes into this period, and it's not immediate. The first strike, comes quickly after. That's probably the election of Trump, April 8th, 2024. Then shortly after, in that same year, 2024, you have the election of Trump, which leads into what comes later. Not immediately. More time passes. This is why, and the shot goes straight at the USA city behind him to destroy it, and that's the end of the film. Now, so where are we? Well, we're in the Trump administration, which is the period of the final movement, if you want to think of that, of the United States and of this film. And as I understand it, the disruptions, divisions, and so on that are happening in the United States right now due to some of President Trump's strategies and policies in dealing with a variety of things are deliberately putting pressure on people who are inevitably going to resist and cause civil unrest. Okay, and that's one of the goals. I mean, in the film, one of the things that it's after here, if you remember at the beginning, is the split U.S. flag right here. Right, there it is. Okay, the division of the United States at doomsday midnight, coming from Donald, Donald, even though it's Psalm 23, it's written so that you can see the Donald. Okay, this is what you get as a complete, destruction of the United States. You're also going to get the end of liberty in the United States, where you see the torch of the Statue of Liberty falling later, and so on there. Okay. All right, so you're gonna see. Okay, so what we're getting is a depiction of the collapse of the church, the United States, the shot going at the United States after that April 8th, 2024 eclipse. So I suspect in the Trump administration, we're seeing it happening. Now, and we get that in Leave the World Behind as well. Remember, in Leave the World Behind, a black family owns and controls the White House. A white family comes and occupies it, but is not considered the owners. The white family leaves the White House, okay, for a period of time when they go out and try to find their way away from it. They come back, and the owner of the home, the black man representing, I think, Obama and the left and all of this, right? He's representing is occupying the White House, like the U.S. White House, and he lets them back in. And Ruth, his daughter, says, "Why did you let them back in?" He said, "It's the right thing to do." And she said, "That there is what's going to screw us over in the end. Letting the white family, letting the Trumps back into the White House, that's going to be the end." And then it's shortly after that in the film that you end up in the sort of end of the whole thing, right? So I think we're looking at that period of time right now. Okay, that's where we're at. And so what's going on, for example, with these events, where'd it go? Is it going to show up again? Anyways, in Minnesota, and then the various things that are coming out of this, the unrest, the protests, the very serious rhetoric, even Waltz framing the situation as if it's a war between Minnesota and the federal government, preparing Minnesota National Guard in order to protect Minnesotans against the federal agents and so on. You're getting we're seeing a situation emerging where a genuine threat of civil unrest that can go beyond just civil unrest into civil war, actual government-sponsored troops fighting one another, federal government ones versus state government ones, and that's very interesting. Now, in a video on Leave the World Behind, one of the more recent ones, I talked about the possibility that the civil unrest comes to an end roughly around the same time as the world goes to war. Possibly a war, a different type of war, breaks out. It could be civil war that just breaks out, the actual all-out civil war, but it could also be an international war that sort of interrupts this because of some major events. You can watch that video. I think it's the last one I published several months ago. But so we'll see where we go from here. But let's go ahead and look at Barbie to see what Barbie has to say about what's happening. Okay, now it's very interesting. If we go back here, Baumbach actually has ties to Jason Blum. They graduated. He graduated. He was a roommate with Jason Blum when they were at Vassar, I guess. And Blum later produced Baumbach's first film. Okay, and so on. So they have a connection, and we know Jason Blum fits into the Get Out of the U.S. Line. He was one of the producers, as his production company was involved in producing Get Out and Us. And we know that these Jordan Peele films, Get Out, pointed to the annular eclipse in June 2020, the solstice eclipse, and it's Get Out of the U.S. Remember, in that film, the people who come from the underground, they are what? They're asked, what are you people? Who are you people? We're Americans. It's the uprising of the Americans. Get out of the U.S. due to the uprising of the Americans that will be happening. Okay? And the Blum line continues, you should have left. Another Jason Blum production. Get out of the U.S. You should have left. See the thread here? Okay? Hunt. And the movie The Hunt was the movie where elite progressives and liberals actually gather and hunt to the death conservatives and Republicans for sport. Okay? And so you have a very violent film specifically about political violence like that. He also is the producer of the Purge films, which point to the same thing, okay, that the U.S. will descend into violence, and the Forever Purge is the most recent one, which I have not had the time to make a video on, but I plan to. But in this one, what happens in the Forever Purge is that the Purge, which is a holiday, just a set number of hours where there's no crime. You can't, everything's legal. You can murder people and you will not be prosecuted for it, arrested for it, anything like that. And but instead of it ending at the time when it's supposed to end and is scheduled to end, it continues afterwards, and the U.S. descends into sort of complete chaos. And you have the Forever Purge, and the goal in that film is to escape the United States and get to a different country, right? Get out of the U.S. Get out of the U.S. You should have left. There's a hunt coming, okay? And in this one, we see that the goal is to go be safe in Mexico, for example. Getting out is better than staying in the United States. And so we get this theme. Now, and I've done a lot of analyses on these films, so I'm not going to review everything clearly. I'm talking about the ones on this page. But if you go to the other McKittrick line, this is he was involved in Donnie Darko and things. Get out of the U.S. before the Civil War, antebellum. Okay, get out of the U.S. before, again, uprisings similar to the other films like Us. Before you get the uprisings, you can watch my Candyman explanation. Nope, at some point you won't be able to. Just like this, you should have left. Now, but I have a series on the Escape from the United States series, which is just about predictive programming, not counseling people to do anything in particular. Now, so we get to Barbie, which is related to all this predictive programming, and we've done a lot of work on White Noise on the channel. You can go check those out. But White Noise has proven to be a very interesting film as far as predictive programming is concerned. If you remember in that film, we have an allegory as well. A lot of these films are allegorical. You can watch the film and you'll enjoy the film if it's the type of film you enjoy, based on just the storyline. Perhaps that is all you're interested in. However, if you want to understand creator intent, you'll find that there's a deeper allegorical meaning and something more profound usually being communicated, at least in a lot of films. And here we see at the end of the film, we have Jack and Babette in the same colors as the Pope and JFK, U.S., and Roman Catholic Church again, just like we had in IPETGOATII. They're in heaven here holding hands under the light, dead. Here's the light shining on them as they're holding hands in the same position. This is framed deliberately to show as if they're dying, right? Coming to an end. And in IPETGOATII, we have the Had It figure violating the woman here, the whore, okay? And we know that this marking on the wall back here is shaped like the United States. If you know, it doesn't take much imagination to fill in the gaps, okay? And and we have her representing a two-sided whore, an old one, right? Skinny leg, stocking down, sagging breast, showing the elderly, and you know, you have targets here, okay, depicted. And on the other side, we have a young, healthy, full leg, stocking up, a much quote-unquote sexier version of the quote-unquote whore of Babylon. And that's where you get the U.S. and the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church being this old, worn, pretty much obviously useless and not nearly as influential or powerful force for them in the Aeon of Osiris. And you have the more attractive one that offers all the goods of the world in the United States. But these two are going to be attacked. And we get the two here as well. And now, and we've just talked about some of this. And let me keep going here. And in that film, we have a false savior. Okay, so we have Mr. Gray going. You see in this scene, he's depicted between them, like in the position of Christ. Now watch, as it goes, he's in the position of Christ, the other side. Okay, what you're looking at here is the Savior, Mr. Gray, the one that's supposed to save them, is actually the one that shot them and killed them. Okay, and in White Noise, one of the themes of White Noise is driving towards this idea of what we have in this life, imperfections and all, should be embraced because it's going to be coming to an end. This is your heaven. Don't have future hope, that sort of thing. Your hope is right here. And in White Noise, remember where the battle with Mr. Gray happened was under the Eclipse symbol in room 8 of this motel. And when he went to look through one of the eclipses to see where all the events are happening, he found a missing 4 and the missing 8 key. You get the 4-8 key. This is pointing to the 4-8 to April 8th, 2024 eclipse. And we see the green lights are go. Right? This is when you get go. The eclipses mark times have changed. Doesn't mean something happens on the day. It marks the green light for the next phase to happen. It's after that April 8th, 2024 eclipse, so this period with the Trump administration and so on, where we're going to see it go. Look, you have red light, yellow light, green light. That's what they're trying to show. This green means go. And that's why the green's over the O. Okay? They've lined that up perfectly to show you that the greenish O is the ring of fire, the black cold symbol is the eclipse. And that room is the 4-8 eclipse. And so where we go, in Germantown, we go to Mr. Gray's room, and we have all sorts of things happen there in the film. Now, okay, and so we have them dying afterwards, right? So you have a shot taken at the system, at the United States and the Catholic Church, the Osirian system for them, okay, this old world order, and they're intending to bring in the Ian of Horus, the post-Christian era, right? That happens at some point afterwards, but it takes a while until they die. They go somewhere else to die. They don't die immediately, okay? And so, again, indicates there's a period of time. Now, this is interesting. There's a license plate in the film that I've always wondered what it meant, okay? And I don't know what it means still, but I'm going to throw out a possibility. Okay, the license plate of the car that drives them to the hospital is shown very clearly here, almost highlighted as they go to drag Mr. Gray out of the car into the emergency clinic. So as they're going into this clinic where they're going to die, like the death comes at this point, after this, right? And we're being told, look here, the death happens after this. Now watch, what does that mean? Possible interpretations. Okay, the T is the 20th letter of the alphabet right there. The H is the 8th letter of the alphabet right there. So this could be 2028, and here's a 7 and a 6. One possibility is 7-6. Another possibility, and I wouldn't know what the 1 is yet. I'm still curious. If you have an idea, tell me what you think that 1 means if this is 7-6. I'll tell you why it may be 7-6 and something that gives me reason, a pause, because I've pointed out the 7-6-2028 date in other predictive programming before as potentially significant, though I thought at the time it might be pretty far away. It's just it was pointed to. But take a look. Remember, in Leave the World Behind at the beginning, what does he do? He has his 76 mug. Time is 6:30, which means one hand is almost pointed to 7 and the other is pointed to 6, clearly drawing attention to a 7-6-7-6. Okay? Then he's going to pick the mugs up, shift them, and make a partial eclipse out of the handles. Does that deliberately. So he picks it up, puts it back down. Okay? And so we get this. And I pointed out that at that point, we do have a partial eclipse on July 6, 2028. So I said maybe this is pointing to a partial eclipse on July 6, 2028. Well, now the license plate actually hits that. Okay? And as time passes, we've gone to 2026 now. Getting to 2028 as when the events that we're seeing unfolding right now actually lead to the death of the United States, and that period after that, possible. Okay, I could see that happening. Another possibility, excuse me, is June 17th. So 17th day of the month, 6th day of the 6th month of the year, June 17th. I should make this bigger. Y'all are probably getting bothered by what's over there. But it doesn't matter. Okay. And so we have the June 17th. That's the anniversary of the Watergate arrests. Maybe we see some sort of move against Trump in June of 2028 before the election. Or some other type of political scandal or whatever. I don't know. But given the Leave the World Behind, I actually am curious to see what happens in that period after that eclipse. Now, but take a look at this. Let me know what you think this could mean. Now, because I don't, when we're trying to, quote unquote, decode a license plate, it's not always easy to do these things very reliably. So I don't put too much stock in it. Just it's something to point out that it's there and it's interesting. And I think it's more interesting because we have an alignment at two different places in predictive programming. We have the 77/6/2028 and the partial eclipse, which points to 7/6/2028. Possibly not a coincidence. All right, now, so they die here. If that's the case, they die here, and that's after they pulled up. This could be pointing to the death of these in the period after 2028, mid-2028, maybe even with the 2028 election. Okay, and the Barbie film is going to help us possibly see that it does go to maybe the 2028 election. Now, who is Mr. Gray? Maybe I'll save that for another film. The next, yeah, you know what? I'm going to put that as something else to do with white noise, because otherwise we're going to spend all our time on white noise again, which is fantastic. Analysis helps, but not what we need to do right now. So let's go on to Barbie. But we have the idea of what's important as a groundwork foundation to get into Barbie. Now, interestingly, here we have Barbie. Of course, I just mentioned the same creators. How does Barbie begin? Since the beginning of time, since the first little girl ever existed, there have been dolls, but the dolls were always and forever baby dolls. So they're taking care of babies like moms. Very traditional ideas of femininity and so on. Okay, not always fun, not always exciting. Perhaps can be framed as somehow not equal to what men traditionally have been able to do, and it seems very limiting, perhaps, and so on, right? This is the idea. This is something that the girls who played with them could only ever play at being mothers. They were limited. That's just what you were, your woman, mother, and that seems very limited, which can be fun, at least for a while anyway. Ask your mother, right? Sort of coming across as a not a criticism of motherhood, but as a identification of traditional ideas of femininity being limiting, okay, and perhaps not as exciting, and so on. Now, what we have is a continuation here of the of somebody calling me. I may need to pause in a second. If I do, I'll deal with that. But this continued until something happened. So this continues, this playing with baby dolls, being boring and only acting like moms, until, voila, here it is. Barbie Eclipse. What's a Barbie eclipse, right? Why are we saying Barbie eclipsing the sun? So what is a Barbie eclipse doing here, right? This is very interesting. If you look, what we have is an eclipse with the release of Barbie. When was Barbie released? The doll, not the movie. The doll. In 1959 on March 9th. When was the eclipse that came with the beginning of Barbies? April 8th, 1959. The Barbie eclipse is an April 8th eclipse. I think this is pointing to the April 8th, 2024 eclipse as well. So we're getting the beginning of Barbie as an idea, a challenge to traditional femininity in the realm of ideas in 1959 that began with the April 8th eclipse, and sometime after the April 8th, 2024 eclipse, we're going to get the move of Barbie, this idea, I think is representing not just feminism, but something like general progressive values, what we would now even get to consider the woke values and so on, that these things will finally perhaps achieve, reality, come into reality, because at the end of the film, Barbie moves from being an idea to being a person. Now, it's more complex than that, and I think some of the things that may be communicated by the creators here are actually pretty clever, interesting, and perhaps even in some cases sort of profound. It's not necessarily best interpreted, the whole film, as just woke is good, feminism is fantastic, men are evil and stupid and dumb. I know that's how it's often framed, but there is something to a possible understanding of this as ideas, whether it's radical feminism or radical anti-feminism or whatever you want to call it, that you get these ideas that they may be that they're all of them outside the realm of realism and missing the beauty of just life in an imperfect world, and how these ideas can be hijacked by people in power and exploited in ways that are, unhealthy. Okay, both sides. And if that's the case, it's kind of interesting. But we'll keep going. Okay, so we have this eclipse. That's the first Barbie eclipse, and I think it's pointing to the April 8th, 2024 eclipse, which we see has been featured very prominently in White Noise, same creators, already at that hotel room, and being featured there and here, I think is what's going on. So we have the eclipse, and then after Barbie eclipse shows up, we get the destruction of these traditional values in the old world, right? The girls pick up their dolls and start rejecting what they were always taught since the beginning of time and what they believed about themselves, and it's a changing understanding of sort of self-identity, how you understand yourself. And we get this new Barbie who was created with a good intention to give more opportunities, make the children dream of a different type of world and so on. But we'll see later the creator of Barbie doesn't have control over where the ideas go, and they can be hijacked even by interests that are institutionalized and very powerful, which would be like the Mattel executives and so on. But anyways, let's keep going. So that's how it begins. And so Barbie is in Barbie Land, and women can be anything in Barbie Land. It's thanks to Barbie, all problems of feminism and equal rights have been solved in this imaginary world. That's how it is, right? That's what's being framed here or laid out. And so we have two worlds. We've got Barbie Land world, and we've got the real world. And later on the film, the creator is going to call Barbie and Barbie Land ideas. Okay, so I think the way we're supposed to understand this, there's a world of ideas and thoughts, battle for the mind, changing values, what people consider good in an ideal world that's sort of not very well thought out in relation to the real world. But if you just keep ideas over there, isolated and keep them just as ideas, it sounds fantastic, but when you try to apply it in reality, it just doesn't work, that sort of thing. I think that's what's being framed here, or laid out. Okay, and so in this world of ideas, you have one way, and then you can have the real world, which is quite a bit different. And they think they've solved all the problems of feminism and all of that in that Barbie world. And we keep going. So in this Barbie world, you see everything is perfect, and it's very artificial. She's going to be going Barbie away, and we get these little symbols. I think they're probably pointing to eclipses, so you get your first 4 eclipses with the 5 perhaps represented there on her little journey. We're going to see, I'm not even going to get into that right now, okay? We're just saying Barbie Land, which is very, very dominated by women, and the men are pretty much useless. Nobody even knows why they're really there. They don't even know what they do. Their job is like beach. Doesn't even make sense. They don't really have a job. They don't have a function. Barbie doesn't actually care about him. He just wants to have Barbie care about him, and she never does. So he just lives in this insecure world trying to impress her and never succeeding. And, so I'm not going to get into all that right now. But he wants to go over and spend some time with her, and, she says, sure, you can come over, but they're going to have a girls' night, we'll see. And they're going to dance. The dance is important. So now they're having this dance party, and we're going to be sitting on an eclipse circle. I'll explain that in a minute. It's very, very clear in a moment. But they're out there dancing, and we're going to get the 5 Kens. These are all different versions of Ken. Okay, He's stereotypical Ken. She's stereotypical Barbie, but we have various Kens. And we even get this very interesting line, again, pointing to these eclipses, where Ken says, yes, 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 yes. We get 4 yeses, and the 5th is, oh, crap, right? That's he's going to point to us. And Barbie disappears with the girls. And then after the oh, crap, we get a Ken versus Ken rivalry between stereotypical Ken and Ken, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Seymour or something, but he's I believe a Chinese Canadian or something. But okay, so we get sort of the Chinese/Asian version of Ken here, and there's a battle, and that's going to become the battle later on. Notice again that it happens after the 4 yes, 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 oh no type of thing. So we get to the 5th, and we're going to go, and I think that corresponds to those eclipses. And I don't think that's too much of a stretch. We have the 5 Kens, we have the 1 her, so we get like 5 suns in the same moon representation. Male, masculine symbolism corresponds to the sun and a lot of these things, and the feminine is the moon. And we're going to see the moon actually appear above this as an eclipse in a moment in the film. Okay, so she gets out there. While she's in the middle of that, again, they're talking about how it's the best day ever, the girls, all the Barbies. Oh, it's the best day ever. And then finally, she has this sort of intrusive thought, and she says, do you ever think about dying? And, a little record scratch, everything goes quiet, everybody looks around like, what? And she says, I don't know why I just said that. And so she tries to, spin it as I'm just dying to dance, and everybody's like, yeah, and they go back to the dancing. But she obviously is anxious about this, okay? And very similar to what we saw in White Noise about existential dread and pending doom, a lot of discussion about death, dying, fear of death. Babette is trying to treat the fear of death with Dilar, this experimental medication, and all that. We can talk about that more. You can watch the White Noise analyses films videos as well. Now, so she is dying to dance, and then we get the overhead view. So there's stereotypical Barbie. Here's your moon, if you want to think of it, in the middle, and here are your rings. 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 5 rings around it, and it transitions. I think this, again, the symbol of the 5 eclipses, and ultimately is related to death at the end, because in White Noise we get similar symbolism on the wall behind them when they're having this discussion. He comes out and says, death, that's what's coming, death. This sort of thing. And then you see the collision of the train, which is representing fascism, with the truck, which is representing the United States. Had Elvis playing in the truck beforehand, okay? And he's the Hitler Studies professor, and they're coming together, and you get fascism meets the United States, which leads to death, okay? And that's what's being represented. But and here it is. So here they're dancing, and turns into a disco ball, which then transitions into the moon. Okay, that was the moon over these. This is representation of a series of eclipses, and that's why you get the yes, 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 oh no, and then you get the fear of death coming afterwards, death coming. Okay, and here we have this is related to. It's related to these eclipses again. Not an accident. Very similar to what we see in White Noise. Very similar to what we see in other predictive programming. Again, I think there's just too many things happening here that are very, very similar from the same creators in 2 different films that appear radically different superficially, like on the surface, but they turn out to be very similar. Okay, and immediately after this moon is going to give us a clock. Okay, he's going to make an attempt to kiss her, fails, no kiss. In the allegory or in a symbolism, I think what could be represented here is either a partial eclipse or a near eclipse that doesn't become an eclipse, because sometimes kisses are representing eclipses in films that are rich in predictive programming and are familiar with this eclipse symbolism. Again, because of the male and the female, when the sun and the moon come together, overlapping one another, you have an eclipse. And so the kiss can represent the coming together of the two celestial objects to make your eclipse. And so here we get something like that. But then we get the she's not interested. And that is going to end. She's going to go have her girls' night. Every night's girls' night. And here we get our clock. Okay, we're going to get a clock right here. He's going to walk away. And then she in bed's going to tell the girls, the other Barbies, I'm not afraid of death anymore. And she has anxiety. And we're going to get this clock. Okay, watch this. So there she is. Good night, Barbies. I'm definitely not thinking about death anymore, because she is thinking about him. And then the moon setting, and the clock goes from here to here. If you watch that again, it even had that the hand on the clock, if you don't think of that, actually even has an arrow. Look right here. See it? There it is. There's your arrow. Okay? This is a clock. We're watching a clock. What time is it? Okay? There it is. The shadow here and the shadow there. It is 11:20, roughly. November 2020. That's your first election after that annular eclipse, the one in which Trump was removed from office. Time passes down to here to 11:28. I think what we're seeing here is a period of time from the November 2020 election to probably the November 2028 election, when it ends. Okay, that would be very close to that 7/6/2028 date, or the 17/6, the June 17th date. If either of those dates or periods of time around or after them somehow have major impacts on what happens in November 2028, when you're supposed to have an election, if that happens, or if it doesn't happen, or whatever happens. Okay? But that gives us a time frame, again pointing to 2028, especially with the coming. This is very short. This happens very shortly after the clear eclipse symbolism here. Okay, what we're getting is the yes, 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 oh no, with the April 2024 eclipse, to an end of the timeline here in 11/28. So we're getting this 2024 to 2028 period. So basically pointing, I think, to the second Trump term being a major issue. And that's going to help us understand when the things happening in Barbie are supposed to be happening in the real world, because what happens in the realm of ideas in Barbie impacts what's happening in the real world, which is, a plausible relationship, right? What we think impacts what actually is, our perspective on reality and all that. Now, we keep going, and now Barbie is no longer in her perfect world. She has bad breath, her stuff burns, the water can be cold, her feet are flat instead of like Barbie doll feet. She can fall. She has to go talk to Weird Barbie, which is a Barbie who the person playing with her in the real world, drew on her, cut her hair off, and didn't care anymore. Left her in splits all the time. And so what happened to her in Barbie Land is that she became a weird Barbie, because in the real world, there's an interaction, the real world, the Barbie Land, somebody didn't care anymore. Okay. And so we get this explanation that there's been a portal opened with the eclipse. Okay, it was with that eclipse that a portal opened between two different worlds. Okay, and it brought in this anxiety about death, fear, and all sorts of problems start to emerge. Okay, and the weird Barbie's going to tell you, you got to go back to the real world, find the kid or person who's playing with you, and fix the problem, however that's done. And she offers her red pill opportunity. Barbie's not going to want to. She just wants to stay in her perfect world, but that wasn't a real option. And so we're going to get this trip through the portal to the real world. And so they take this journey, stereotypical Barbie and stereotypical Ken, to the real world, which again, very interesting. We get the eclipse before it, And we're going to get right as they enter the real world, going to go up and immediately going to flash a tree in front of the sun, which again is a way they represent eclipses. So I think the idea is very clearly communicated that the portal is related to the eclipse time. Okay. Now, I said the portal. When the bad stuff starts happening. Okay, that's gonna, if you want to think of it that way. When all this, the imperfections of bad ideas on the world and this interaction between them, when that really takes off. Okay, so think of that as the Trump term. Now, the second Trump term. So we're going to go there. She's going to discover the world's not exactly like she expected. She thought Barbie Land had fixed the real world because, shouldn't the real world map onto such a perfect world where women are controlling everything and they run the courts and they run everything. And Ken is noticing that everything seems to be reversed here. Like the guys are the important ones. And notice that during this period of time, if you want to think of it as the progressive ideas that are being represented from Barbie Land, are not being very welcomed in the real world. So we're going to have opposition in the real world to what? To leftist ideas, if you want to think of it that way. So we do see that, right? Trump is president in this term, and now we're starting to see the tides turn. Woke is over. We're seeing the left facing opposition from the federal government, even with relation to their immigration issues and all sorts of things, okay? And so now what used to be okay and perfect in the perfect world, now you're suffering. You're going to jail for it, getting arrested because you're always doing weird stuff here, and they're going to get arrested again, right? And he's going to keep observing when he's out, and he's like, wow, it looks like the men rule the world here, and he's going to see that guy tell this woman, hey, quiet, hold on, I got to finish something. And he's going to practice this. So he's learning about, quote unquote, patriarchy in the film. Meanwhile, she has, her job is to find the kid or the person playing with her, the doll, in the real world so that she can, make that person not so miserable, whatever it is that's happening that's causing anxiety about death and existential dread and so on. And while she's out there, she sees this elderly woman who would not be in Barbie Land, for example, and she recognizes her as beautiful. And she's starting to appreciate the imperfections of the real world. Okay? And she says, you're beautiful. And this woman says, I know it. And they laugh. And so there's this recognition, I think, here that the creators are pointing out that these ideas that have developed, whether it's the progressive ideas and their idealism there, or the perhaps the right-wing ideas in their minds, the creators' minds, that when they understand them as sort of this perfect ideal, that in the real world doesn't work exactly like that. But there's something beautiful about the real world anyways, despite the imperfections. And I think that's one of the things they're going to drive at here. But so we're going to see the FBI contact Mattel. This is sort of a U.S. government slash... Mattel is going to represent, I think, like a network of very powerful people behind the scenes that are perfectly fine with you having a whole lot of ideas as long as they don't become real and they continue to be in power. Okay, so think of this as like the elites. And so we have this collaboration between the elites and government and the corporate world and the various institutions that are going to basically be content with all of us normal people having ideas. You can think whatever you want, say whatever you want, as long as it doesn't actually change anything and they stay in power, it's fine. Okay, so that's what's going to be communicated. And so this guy, Aaron, is going to go up. He needs to talk to the CEO and the executive board, of Mattel to tell them, we got a real problem, Barbie's escaped. And he gets up there, tells him this, Is Barbie Land like an alternate reality, or like our imaginations come to life? And we don't really get a clear answer from the Mattel CEO. He doesn't actually care what Barbie Land is, as long as it's not going to change his life and change his status and power and so on. So where do Barbie and Ken go? They go to this Davy Crockett Junior High, home of the frontiersmen. Again, this is a frontier between the two worlds. Not a coincidence. The two worlds. This is where Barbie Land world is going to meet real world kids. She's going to come, and she's going to be called, surprisingly, a fascist. They reject her. You represent everything wrong with our culture: sexualized capitalism, unrealistic physical ideals, and so on. You set the feminist movement back 50 years. You destroy girls' innate sense of worth, and you're killing the planet with your glorification of rampant consumerism and so on. Okay? So we have Barbie Land is like the land of ideas, but it's a caricature of worldviews, basically. It's not very realistic. It's childish and so on. The real world is the real world, but Barbie dolls and products are a separate thing. The actual Barbie dolls are attempts to instantiate, this is the way I'm framing it here, instantiate or incarnate the ideas in the real world. But what happens is the ideas collapse the moment they touch reality. They become products. So Barbie maybe was created by Ruth Handler, the creator, I think that's her name, in order to, make little girls feel like they have different opportunities and can be whatever they want to be and all that stuff. Maybe it sounds great at the beginning, but then they're taken over by a company like Mattel and turned into a product, and they end up needing to be marketed, and the ideas are sort of absorbed by the machine, that's the way I put it, taking on qualities that we're supposed to oppose, right? They take on the qualities that the world actually wants to pay for, as opposed to, being driven, Mattel being driven by a desire for the well-being of children and society. They're looking for profit, and so the toys cease to be effective at actually bringing about a change in ideas in the world. In fact, it becomes part of the problem. Now, so she's picked up by Mattel. They're going to try to put her back in the box, okay, to send her back, but she does not necessarily like that. She thinks she likes the real world, so she runs off, is going to escape. She ends up going into this room in the building where she meets the ghost of Ruth Handler, the one who created her back at the beginning. And she's surprised the real world's not what she thought it was, and the woman says it never is, and isn't that marvelous? See, the movie is sort of, while it was taken to be a very much a feminist woke film, I think the film itself actually, in some ways, I'm not saying I agree with it, but in some ways it's pointing to how extreme ideas and worldviews, whichever side, don't necessarily and can't be made to happen in this real world. Okay, and that's part of the beauty of the world, the way it is, the imperfections, that it can't be predictable, understood as predictable. Very much like White Noise. In White Noise, what was quote unquote heaven for them? I hope the aimless days never end. Right? It's sitting at your kitchen table with your family. It's going to the supermarket together. It's simple stuff that they called boring. But isn't it great? That's what White Noise is trying to communicate on one level. And we're getting that here as well. It's sort of like saying, okay, so you want all these things to change in the real world. You want this ideal world. You want a utopia for women, a utopia for men, a utopia for whoever. And because of that, you're spending all your time getting that. You're very disappointed because it's not that. And, why not just see that the old woman who has lost her youthful perfections is beautiful? Or that isn't it marvelous that the world isn't what you thought it would be or want it to be? It's not perfect, and so on. And I think that's something that I used to, they're going for. Like, and here it is. I'm not what I used to be. I used to be perfect. I don't know. I think you're just right. All right, again, challenging mistaken ideas about what the perfect is. But we'll keep going. So they're going to go back. She gets sort of rescued by the person who caused the portal to break. It wasn't the daughter, it was the mother. And they're all going together back to Barbie Land. And Barbie's going to show just how great Barbie Land is as this feminist utopia, because she's still thinking like that. She goes back. And on the way back, they find out. Oh, Mattel CEO says they've gone to Barbie Land. Oh no! And she brought humans there with her. This could mean extremely weird things for our world. Okay, so this portal that opened has enabled the two sides to go back and forth, and this is going to cause some serious problems for the real world. And the problems they're concerned with are not anything to do. The problems they're concerned with is their own status. That's what it's going to come down to. We'll see that becomes a little more clear later. So they've got to go to Barbie Land. But what's happening in Barbie Land? When Barbie arrives, she finds that it is no longer the feminist utopia. Girls, instead of being president and Supreme Court justices and, Nobel Prize winners and everything, they're cheerleaders, while the guys are playing volleyball with their shirts off, flexing. And, we've seen the patriarchy introduced here, and they're, surprised to see this, and the name of it's, Kendom. But what's happening in the world of ideas during, again, let's put this between 2024 and 28, so the second Trump term, is people are thinking differently. There's a change in ideas, and it's affecting the real world. So the products that are in the real world down here being sold are going to correspond to Ken. So as we go to Ken World, Ken says, this isn't Barbie's dream house anymore. This is Ken's Mojo Dojo Kaza house. And the product we see here is the Mojo Dojo Kaza house. And he says it's flying off the shelves. They're flying off the shelves. Kids are clamoring for them. Ken is on T-shirts, mugs, and number one tattoo. They're going to be a blockbuster hit movie, and so on. Okay, and so we get this idea that what's happening in the realm of ideas is changing the real world. And this is a real issue for the Mattel CEO. Okay, he's not happy with this. Executive words ladies, secretary, administrative assistant, whatever, and someone who is probably her daughter back here. They brought her back to the, let's see, I got to read. Executive words lady and someone who is probably her daughter back here and close the portal. Our world could be altered forever. So he's worried about the world being altered forever. Time is running out. Blade faster. Okay. And what is he worried about? Is he worried about money primarily? Is he worried about girls' dreams? And he's, we don't want our product to be for boys. It needs to make girls happy or whatever. Is that what he's concerned about? No. If you look, he says, but what does it matter, the second executive says, if it's Barbie or Ken, the money is pouring in. Shame on you, executive number 2. Do you think I spent my entire life in boardrooms because of a bottom line? And this is sarcasm, and not sarcasm, but it's clearly not genuine. Okay? So you have to ask, what is the concern? If it's not money, and if it's not the dreams of little girls, okay, and they've got to go stop it, what are they actually concerned about? Their own status, place, authority, and the perpetuation of whatever power and control they have. They represent the elite. Okay? The elite, the people in power in established institutions, and so on. Okay? They don't want things to change. You can have your ideas, keep them in Barbie Land or Kenland, but do not bring them to the world that changes their place. They don't care what product they're selling as long as they're the ones selling it, as long as they're the ones on top. Okay? Now, So you go, we're seeing Barbie Land, and Barbie's concerned that the girls, the other Barbies, are not normal. What's wrong with them? It's like they've been brainwashed or something. And Gloria says, oh, it's like in the 1500s when with all the indigenous people and smallpox, they had no defenses against it. They had no clue that this was even something to be aware of and to watch out for, and so they fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Immediately when the Kens came back with Patriarchy, and they're like, "Oh, this is fantastic! I don't have to do anything. I just whatever." And so, the Kens are gonna take over the whole place. They're gonna have an election to replace change the Constitution, change the name, make sure the guys stay on top forever, and so on. Let's see here. Well, honey, that's life. It's all changed. So Barbie's dealing with anxiety, which are real issues. And we get Barbie dolls in the real world, I guess, that are like, depressed Barbie, your new depression Barbie, and so on. So they got to go back to the real world. They're leaving Barbie behind because they've given up on her briefly until they come to their senses and think, no, we got to go back and help her, that sort of thing. And as they're leaving, it turns out Alan, who I guess is a discontinued Barbie product, and there was only one of them, is in the car with them as they're leaving, and they run into the Kens building a type of wall, trying to keep people in or out, depending on where they're at. And he says, as soon as they figure out how to build that wall, not just up, but across, we're not going to be able to get out. And so he goes and he has a fight with them and all of that. And he beats them all up. And after he finishes that, they say, well, no, we got to go back to Barbie anyways and save her. We're seeing it change into Kendom, and we can't have that. Let's see. Oh, and here they're confused. Like, how do we get the girls, the other Barbies, to snap out of it? Because it's like they're almost hypnotized. And Gloria goes into this long speech almost about how impossible it is to be a woman and the difficulties of being a woman. You are so beautiful and you're so smart, she says to her, and it kills me, to Barbie, that you don't think you're good enough. Like, we have to always be extraordinary, and somehow we're always doing it wrong. You're supposed to be thin, but not too thin, and you can never say what you want and say that you want to be thin. You have to say that you want to be healthy, but you also have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You're supposed to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the time. You're supposed to be a career woman, but always be looking out for other people. You have to answer for men's bad behavior, which is insane. But if you point that out, then you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to be pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or threaten other women. You're supposed to be part of, and so on. Okay, and she's gonna ramble here about this for a bit, and it's the type of, I guess it's supposed to be framed as a criticism of the patriarchy because it puts women in this position, as if the problem is a patriarchal system and not just that this is a common set of problems that all humans have due to the nature of vice. Okay, what you're really seeing here is not that these aren't only problems for women. What the problem is that virtue is, like Aristotle said, virtue is the mean between vices. It's the middle ground, and walking that line is very hard. You're supposed to be courageous, but not foolhardy. You're supposed to be careful, but not cowardly. You're supposed to be right, and we can do the same thing and just go through and say it's hard to be a virtuous person, whether a woman, man, executive, athlete, child, whatever, and whatever you're doing to excellence is walking a fine line between ways and extremes in which you can perform poorly. But what people do is sometimes they come up with their own theory of why it's difficult for them rather than figuring out how to be virtuous, and then they identify whatever their explanation is for why it's difficult for them, and they think the solution is to eliminate that cause. And so if you would go through and say, here's the difficulty, it looks to me like it's patriarchy's fault, then you can blame patriarchy or the right, or conservatism or traditional values or whatever. Okay. And she's wrong. It's a bad argument. But I'm not saying there's not real difficulties here, but it has nothing to do with the patriarchy or other people's fault. It's just it's inherent to humanity that these are the types of difficulties we are going to be confronted with. Man, woman, child, whatever. Now, so she goes from here, and when she did that, some people snapped out of it who were present. And she says, wait a minute. This is what we have to do. We have to give voice to the cognitive dissonance required to be a woman under the patriarchy. And by doing so, we'll rob it of its power and people will snap out of it. So we need to do that to all the Barbies so that they wake up. And the strategy is that Kenland, remember Kenland, what is Kenland? It represents, if the real world right now in the film would be between 2024-28, Trump era, second term, then Kenland would probably be the ideas that are being associated right now with the right wing. So I don't think this is really feminism versus patriarchy. I think it's more like progressive ideas versus something in the realm of MAGA / style conservative style thinking, not necessarily traditional conservatism, but whatever, right? Something like that. Think left, right. Okay, and so what we have is the right, Kenland, contains the seeds of its own destruction. First, we have to get the Barbies away from their Kens, full strategy, and then turn the Kens one against another. Okay, the final stage of our plan to turn the Kens against each other, to divide the conservative movement. If you think of that, divide the right, get them to hate each other, right? Get rid of Charlie Kirk, replace him with other people, and make it a huge contentious battle that divides everybody. So we can't agree on how to handle things. Get people divided over how to deal with various policies that Trump is implementing or adopting, and so on. All right, and so that's the goal. And what is the description of Ken, or think of it, the description of the leader of the Kens, or the leader of the conservative movement at the time? Trump. He took your house, the White House. He brainwashed your friends. He's changing people's minds to making them think against the progressive ideas, and he wants to control the government. See, so we're getting this idea that he is genuinely an enemy of the progressives in Barbie Land. So we get 4 hours later, they're going to go listen to play guitar, and he keeps playing guitar and singing songs like "I want to push you down." Well, we will. Well, I will. Whatever. So almost a song that's selected to represent the most extreme and terrible ideas behind quote unquote patriarchy, and they fake like they're interested, and they try to generate jealousy by looking at the phone, who you're checking, who you're writing, so on. The other Ken. And that leads to anger and infighting, a war, okay? And the battle begins here. One group of Kens is going to come on to the shore. It looks very much like storming, so World War, you're storming the beaches of Normandy, you're World War II imagery. So one possibility here, the question is, before I say possibilities, what's the question? What are we looking at? We're looking at a conflict, and we want to say, what is the conflict representing? Well, I do see World War type symbolism here with the Normandy beaches being stormed. We have stereotypical Ken on the one side, and we have a Chinese Canadian Ken on the other side leading it. So we may have some sort of international conflict hinted at here between West and East. You clearly were in the realm of ideas. So this is a battle between the Kens, and the Kens are also representing, like we already said, the conservative movement and so on. So here's a divided conservative movement that's going to lead to the loss of an election in 2026 and 28, probably, the midterms and the next presidential election. So while they have all this infighting, the ideas that they represent are going to fail. Okay? And so we may even also have symbolism here of violence in the country between sides. Okay? But I think probably it's sticking primarily political because we're in the realm of ideas. But the question is, remember, just like the dojo, mojo, casa, house, or whatever, it had things change in the real world at the same time. What's happening here would be impacting the real world in some way, but they don't tell us exactly what's going on. That's we're supposed to speculate about what's going on in the world. We're getting the battle between the battle among the people who advocate the patriarchy or the right-wing conservative values, probably, or some other violence or unrest in the country. Okay, I don't know, but I think it stays in the realm of ideas primarily. Now, so you get the conflict. Meanwhile, the women representing the progressives are looking on and just watching because this was their plan. They wanted this to happen. They wanted to break down the opposition and make them fight one another so that they will miss the election and lose the election. Okay, the elites are unharmed, walking around their suits and ties as observers as well. Okay, and they're walking along. Are there real weapons here? No, right? There's no real threat here. And then the battle is going to go to sort of the climax between Ken, stereotypical Ken, and the other Ken, and it starts with this. You know, they're going to go here, and we're going to go straight to an eclipse again with the battle. I don't know which one that is. Perhaps around the midterm, right? This could be around the midterms. So before the midterms, we have an August 12th, 2026 total solar eclipse. Then you have the next year, and then also before the other election, before the 2028 election. So we could be getting close to the end, and probably, again, July 22nd, 2028 would be the election. Probably. But it could be pointing to the midterm and that, or just the midterm. We're going to see. But I think in either case, all the divisions among the conservatives will probably lead to them not winning, which is the strategy being laid out here. Now, at this date, we've already looked to that date possibly showing up in other films, in Turning Red, for example. But let's, I'm not going to get into that right now. It's getting long, this video. So here we have the battle turns into this dance-off, and they finish here, and we get to the slide. Where's my... Oh, there it is. Okay, and weren't we supposed to vote today? So they're out fighting and missing the vote. Meanwhile, they lost. Okay, they lose the vote because they're infighting, and that's what's going to be the end of the last attempt of the anti-progressives, if you think of that. Think of it this way. And he's very disappointed that he loses. They win. And as it goes on, we're going to see that things are pretty much going to go back to the way they were, except the question is, what do you do with Barbie? And Barbie has this conversation with her creator, the Ruth Handler lady again, and she's gonna have to do how uncomfortable it is, and the idea is that how uncomfortable it is to become human, and she's being offered this, not opportunity, but she's wrestling with, should she become a human, or should she stay an idea? Now you may say that's just a dumb question. Ideas can't choose for themselves to become real, but that's not what this is. An allegory. What we're saying is the ideas that came into the idea realm back in the late 1950s, the new Barbie dolls, have taken on a life of their own, no longer under Ruth Handler's control. She may have had very innocent, simple ideas behind them, plans, just wanting to make girls happy and to think and to dream a little bigger in some ways. Okay? But it took on a life of its own. It went its own way. It developed into what we have, like these modern progressive ideas. Okay? And she's being asked, does she go all the way, a stereotypical Barbie, to the real world? Does it become live? Do the little ideas, seeds that began in 1959 as the progressive movement and so on started to develop and ideas changed about what women should be, what people should be, what types of things are good and what types of things are not good, what is a good life, and so on. When that was all starting in the late 50s and the 60s, should this come all the way around and become real? That's out of Ruth's hands. Okay? Barbie says, would you give me permission to do that? You don't need my permission. I couldn't control you any more than I control my own daughter. Okay? She can't control it. She started something a long time ago. She's dead. She can't change it. It's probably gone way beyond anything she dreamed or even wanted. Who knows? Okay? It's out of her control. The question is, should the progressive values that the world's arrived at now become real? Should they become the way of the world? And Barbie chooses yes. And so at the end of the day, what happens is Barbie becomes real. Barbeland has a real instantiation permanent in the world. Now, this could be interpreted two ways. Okay? One way to interpret this is that after the 2028 election, the Trump years end, the Republicans are ousted, the left takes power, and that's the end of the right. They squash it after that. Maybe that's when the hunt happens, and you're done. Okay? 2020 to 2032 and afterwards, you won't be seeing any more right-wing being an issue, because now the ideas that began in 1959 and went through the 60s and this whole progressive movement that's been going on for 60 plus years and evolving and developing and quote unquote maturing in their minds, has finally arrived. And after the Trump administration is defeated and the Republicans are ousted, we're going to finally see it come to an end. And she comes into reality. Okay? Another possibility, and I think the film possibly has both meanings, but another possibility is that the idea needed to be toned down, right? So somehow at the end of this, instead of continuing to praise an ideal that is not realistic. You can't make it happen in the real world. After all this happens, it's best for us to accept an imperfect world and perhaps even go back a bit, right? Because where does she end up at? The gynecologist. Isn't that interesting? Because at the very beginning of the film, the little girls were rejecting baby dolls and traditional ideas of motherhood. Barbie is going all the way back, possibly to looking at motherhood as something good. The very thing that they all got bored with at one point. You see? And so that would be like White Noise, and this life which is imperfect and aimless and boring, and that's beautiful, right? And she's embracing that. I think when I say it could be both, I think the main storyline, probably what the creators are trying to say, is that the extreme ideas aren't realistic. Radical feminism isn't going to be that great, because you're going to miss out on real living as a woman, perhaps, and find that middle ground. Okay, but But as far as the allegory is going, I think what we're seeing is the idea is coming to reality. And I think it seems to me like the White Noise creators and the Barbie creators, so the same folks, it seems to me like they actually wouldn't necessarily be happy with what's going on, but they know what's going on. Something like that, right? They know that where this is headed is the hunt, get out of the U.S., this sort of thing. But perhaps they're not big fans of it. And in the meantime, they're saying, embrace life, what we have. Something like that. But either way, that's what we have here. Now, I said at the beginning of the video that I was going to mention also where I think Venezuela fits into all this. I forgot to show that. Let me just show you here. I think Venezuela could, no promises here, this could be headed towards a quagmire. Okay, right here, right? This is sinking into a quagmire, the Latino, and this precedes a Chinese movement, perhaps against an Asian tiger like Taiwan. And China's already praised, in some sense, I don't know, Trump for what he did in Venezuela, saying that it's a model for what they could do in Taiwan. And so we could see Venezuela descend into a quagmire and then subsequently see an international war take off due to a Chinese similar move in Taiwan. Okay? We'll see where that heads and what's going on there. And you know, maybe we'll get back into IPETGOATI again. But especially since the Heliofont channel posted a number of videos recently. You know, if you've haven't seen those, there they are. Created several of them. Some people I saw in comments said that if you sum the total time up, it adds up to 9 minutes and 11 seconds of new content. I've not taken the time to do that. I have watched them. I do think it's interesting that the imagery does have a lot of similarities to what you see in IPETGOATI with broken ice floating around and these sorts of things, perhaps being some sort of a hint of where we're at. But anyways, there's a lot going on. But what do we learn from Barbie? What do we learn from that film, I think, as understood as predictive programming, is that the bad stuff really takes off after the April 8th, 2024 eclipse with the Trump presidency. That's going to lead to turmoil. The ideas that there's an interaction between ideas and the real world, where the real world's going to get all messed up. Potential threat to established elite power. The elites are going to remain relatively untouched by this. Meanwhile, the right is going to be eventually defeated through its own self-destructive tendencies. And then subsequently, we'll go right back to that path away from conservative traditional values, and in fact the progressive ideas win, and perhaps even that's how the church and traditional U.S. is eventually sort of ended, right after 2028 or in 2028 and the years following. When that election comes around, you get the end of it, and that may be the hunt. I don't know. Okay, so all right, like, subscribe, share, take care, blessings.